Hey guys, welcome back to the New Nine Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Cubitt, and today we got an awesome episode for you guys. We're going to be breaking down the first major of the golf season in the PGA Championship, and we also got an awesome interview for you guys. So subscribe to the channel, like, comment. I'm looking forward to it, so here we go. Okay, so like I said, we got a big week in the PGA Tour. It's the first major of the season, and I think all of us are just dying to watch a major championship. It's kind of a bummer that it's not the Masters, but it is the PGA Tour, the PGA Championship, and it's at TPC Harding in San Francisco. I think the biggest headline this week is, can Brooks three-peat? So obviously Brooks Koepka's won the PGA Championship the last 2 years. He'd be the first person in over 50 or 60 years to have three-peated it, and everyone's just wondering, can he three-peat? So obviously he's had success in a lot of majors, but he's kind of, he's fallen down the ranks as far as the regular tour events. So last week, he started to be trending. So last week was the FedEx St. Jude. Brooks, I think, had a T2 place. So in the stretch there was kind of Justin Thomas had a big run on the day, and Brooks was definitely in contention. So I think had Brooks birdied the 18th hole, he would have gone to a playoff with Thomas. But if you were watching, he hooked his ball into the water, so he obviously wasn't able to make birdie, and it ended up putting him in a T2 finish. But Brooks is definitely trending as far as golf goes, especially heading into a major. He's definitely a guy that will probably be in contention. Obviously, he's won it the last 2 years. Last week, Justin Thomas ended up winning the FedEx St. Jude, and that win gave him the world number one spot. So previously, Rahm had taken over the number one spot, and then with this win, it put Thomas into number one. So Justin Thomas is the number one seed heading into the PGA Championship. And he's playing really phenomenal golf too. He shot 5 under in his last round, and he ended up winning by 3 shots. So he had a really clutch up and down on 18. He had this really big chip. It was maybe like a 30-yard chip shot with water in the back, kind of to a tuck pin, and he was able to get up and down. So it was a really good win for Justin Thomas. He's one of these young guns that is going to be a force to reckon with for the next 20 years probably on tour. So it was good to see Justin Thomas win. Good to see Brooks in contention. I guess time will tell if Brooks can come out on top this week. Something cool about last week too is that Justin Thomas didn't have his regular caddy on the bag. He actually had Jim Bones McKay. So Jim Bones, as everyone knows him, is famously Mickelson's old caddy. So those two had a ton of history, and I think they ended up playing together on the final round. So I saw on Twitter, on Instagram, there was a lot of chirping back and forth between Justin Thomas and Mickelson and Bones, and I think they were really ragging on Phil's sunglasses. If you see Phil playing this year, I think he has a new endorsement with a sunglass company, and he's been rocking these aviators. So there was kind of some funny back and forth with Justin Thomas saying, him and Bones had so much fun just making fun of Phil and his sunglasses. And then, of course, Phil had the mic drop when he tweeted something like, y'all are making fun of my sunglasses, and I'm just trying to figure out how to spend this $5 million endorsement check. So classic Phil with the mic drop. He's such a funny guy. You got to follow that guy on Instagram and Twitter. He's a really good follow, and obviously such a good guy. Tour vet, probably top 10 all time. Phil's a legend. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to do a little bit of a betting breakdown as far as what my bets were for the PGA Championship this week. With it being a major, I definitely put some coin on some players. Typically what I'll do for regular weeks is I'll bet guys kind of to finish top 5, top 10, top 20. If I have any gut feelings, or I've looked at some statistics, or I've looked at how guys are playing, maybe bet on some trending guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of my lineups that I put in. So instead of just betting individuals, I bet on a website that allows you to do lineups. So it's a combination of your 6 lineups. Places like DraftKings or FanDuel. Those are the type of lineups that we set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a breakdown of who I've picked this week and who I think has a good chance of winning, and then maybe compare them to what you think. So if you think I have some good picks or some bad picks, let me know in the comments section. So what I did for a bunch of my lineups, I set in maybe 6 or 7 lineups. So, you could risk $6, $3, $5, $20 in the hopes of getting a big payout. If you double your money in these things, it's pretty good. But I think in the $20 buy-in, the first prize is like over $1 million. So obviously that would be wicked to hit. So what I did, strategically in most of my lineups is I picked two of the big favorites. So I did either a combination of like Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy, John Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Tiger Woods, a combination of those types of guys with kind of some middle of the pack or maybe a couple underdogs. So I really think that this week is going to be a top 5 or 6 favorite to win. I think major championships are, it kind of what separates the good from the great. And in, obviously in previous years, a lot of the major championships have been won by guys within the top 10. So, if you look at Brooks Koepka's formula in the last 2 PGA Championship wins, it's clear that you kind of got to be big and strong, especially to get out of the rough that they've been growing out. Like I said, they're playing at TPC Harding Park in San Francisco, and it's been kind of cold, wet, and rainy. So the rough is really growing out. The conditions are damp. The ball's not flying as far. Obviously, they're at sea level. It's not an overly long course, but in some of the interviews that I watch with the players, they're going to be feeling the length just because of the conditions that they've been playing. And so this week for a winner, I'm definitely picking someone that's a strong, physically strong player to win, like a Brooks, or maybe Rory will pull it out, or maybe Bryson. So speaking of Bryson DeChambeau, this guy's been getting a ton of hate this year on the tour, and I'm kind of on the opposite of the Bryson hate. I think that Bryson's really good for the game, and he's kind of been breaking the mold ever since he came on tour. I think he kind of threw everyone off when he was using the one length irons. Or, this guy's they call him the scientist, right? So there's a lot of method to his madness. So I think if you look at what Bryson did this year, the biggest change is obviously his physical appearance. That this guy put on a ton of weight and a ton of muscle just to gain some speed and power, which, that's the way that the game has been trending the last 10 years, is speed and power. You look at guys like, Dustin Johnson, who's been on the tour for so many years, as being one of the longest guys hitting on tour. Then you look at Brooks's recent wins. He's a big guy, and hits the ball far, and has so much power to get out of the rough. So even if these guys are bombing it 330, 340, 350 yards down the fairway, if they miss the fairway, they're strong enough to hit wedges out of these out of the rough that they're still able to get looks at birdie, right? So if you look at Bryson specifically, this year he's leading the tour on driving distance, and it's by a large margin. He's averaging 324 yards off the tee, which is 10 yards further than the guy in third in driving distance. Second is Cameron Champ. Champ had a win earlier this year, but hasn't done a ton since. Where you look at Bryson, I think he's got like 10 or 12 top 10 finishes. So I definitely think he's going to be in contention. I think he's a guy that wants to silence the haters, and I really think he's been making all these changes specifically for major events and to put together a winning formula, which he definitely has been. This guy's definitely a force to reckon with on tour. Some of the less expensive players that I took, who I think have a great chance at winning this week. One guy, Ricky Fowler. Ricky's due for a major. He's had a ton of practice playing in California. He's super dangerous with his putter, and he hits a lot of fairways. So I think Ricky will have a good week. He wants to secure that major, and so he can join his buddies like JT and Spieth as a major winner. Another guy kind of middle money wise was Colin Murakawa. So Colin's one of the young guys on tour. If you haven't heard of him, you definitely will be. He's won already this year, and when he gets things going, he's as good or better than the top players in the world. He went to the University of California, so he's definitely going to be familiar with the conditions. If this guy can get some birdies going, he could definitely run away with it. My third guy, kind of middle of the pack, is Tony Feno. So this is a guy that should definitely have 3 or 4 majors by now, but it seems like he keeps coming 1 or 2 strokes short. He's becoming Mr. Second Place. Remember last year, his run at the Masters, he played the final round with Tiger. He had that infamous hole-in-one in the practice round, and he was kind of running and twisted his ankle and still was like lights out. I think he was a leader or one off the lead day one. When he had that kind of bum ankle. So this year is no surprise. He's playing really well. I think a couple weeks ago he shot a 59, and that was from like 73 or 7,400 yards. Like, this guy is so long, and he just rains birdies. So I really hope that Tony can have a strong 4 weeks. I think it's good for the game, good for Tony, that this guy's definitely going to be winning a major. Hopefully it's this year. So Tony Finau is another guy that I bet. Time for some sleeper picks. So in these the DraftKings or FanDuel type games. Obviously, if you spend some money on some Rorys and Brysons and John Rahm, those types of guys, they're expensive, so you don't have a ton of money left to buy. So here's some sleeper picks that I have. One of my sleeper picks this week is Brandt Snedeker. And for some reason, Snedeker always plays well on the West Coast. He won the Farmers Insurance in 2016 in San Diego. He also won the Pebble Beach Pro-Am at Pebble Beach in 2015. And I really think he can continue his streak on the West Coast. I think he can lock down at least maybe a top 20. So we'll see if he can make it to the weekend. And, he's an older vet on tour that would love to take a run at a major. Another sleeper that I have is a guy that a lot of people know more for his savage tweets and Twitter responses, and that's Max Hama. Max Hama, don't quote me on his last name pronunciation, but he's also a California grad. He's familiar with the landscape. This year he had a T3 at the 3M. He was T5 at the Genesis, T6 at the Waste Management. So let's see if he can play well in a major week. He was something that wasn't a ton of cash, but I think he could get really good value. And if he sneaks out to top 5, that would be awesome. My last sleeper is Brendan Todd, who was leading all week last week, and he had kind of a final round collapse. He could have easily shot like 1 under to win, but he had a rough go and went 5 over to the finish, and it was a tie for 15th. So I think he's definitely going to be looking for redemption this week. He has got a whole bunch of top 10s, and that would be a guy, Brendan Todd, that you may not have heard of, the last couple years, but he's been playing some really good golf, competing with the best of them, and I think he could be in contention. So that kind of wraps up my my own gambling predictions. But I think if obviously if some of those guys come in, I have a bunch of lineups with a combination of them. So we're really hoping that they can win us some cash. Talking about Brendan Todd's final round, kind of a club final round collapse. I had my own collapse of golf last weekend. Last weekend was our club championships at the Country Hills Golf Course. And for whatever reason, I like to save my worst golf for those 3 days of the year in club championships. I'm not a huge tournament golf player. I don't compete a ton on the amateur scale. I play some events for sure, but by no means did I grow up playing competitive golf. It's just something that I enjoy doing. I'm fairly decent at it, so I like to give it, give club championships a run. So I think prior to my club championships, my 3 rounds prior, I shot like a 2 under 70, then a 72, and a 73. So I was definitely trending in my practice rounds that I thought I would have a decent kick of the can, maybe could get into contention. But where I play, there's some unreal golfers. That there were 16 guys in our club championship flight, and the cutoff was a 0.2 index. So I think the lowest guy was like a +3, all the way down to a 0.2 was the cutoff. So if you were a 0.3, you're not even in the championship flight, you're in the second flight. That just shows how good of golfers we have at Country Hills. There was even 5 or 6 guys who didn't play who have caps lower than a 0.2. So potentially I could not have made it. I think my cap was frozen at like a +0.5. I imagine I would have been in the championship flight if those other guys played, but still, that just shows how good of competition we have at Country Hills. So the first 2 days that I played, it just wasn't my best golf. I think I had 2 birdies in 2 days, which obviously is not going to be a contender. I think it was like 76, 77. It wasn't last place, but it was definitely 9 or 10 strokes behind the leader. So on the third and final day, I had really nothing to lose. My plan was to just try to get a bunch of birdies, go at pins, be aggressive, because really I had nothing to lose. If I finished last place, whatever, I'm okay with that. But I wanted to try to play well, obviously. So we were obviously the low guys go in the last group, so we were maybe 3 or 4 in front of them, just kind of middle of the pack. I ended up birdieing my first 3 holes. So I was 3 under through 3, had a turkey, off to a wicked start. I ended up having 5 birdies on the front 9 and 2 bogeys. So I finished 33. 3 under par through 9, and I was feeling really good. And then a weather alarm went. So this was the second time in the 3 days that there was over an hour weather delay. So you kind of just lose your momentum. You're kind of not as focused about the game. You're socializing and you're seeing your buddies, but it just kind of takes you out of that funk. So with it being a weather delay, obviously there was a lot of lightning in the forecast and the wind really picked up. So when we started the back 9, there was an easy 40 kilometer an hour wind into our face for the first 5 holes. And I like to think of myself as a fair weather golfer, that if it's, sunny and no wind, I have a chance to birdie a ton of holes, but not the case in the wind. So my weakness definitely showed playing into this wind, that I ended up having like 2 doubles and a triple in my first 5 holes on the back nine, which obviously, took my round from something that was looking pretty good to obviously a crap round. So I ended up carding a 44 on the back. So I went 33, 44. So obviously I didn't build new 9 on shooting 2 good 9-hole rounds. And I guess I'm just living my brand in having a new 9. But it was a reverse. Normally I like to go 44, 33, but it was the opposite. So it was obviously a bummer to finish like that, having a pretty strong front 9. But what are you going to do? You just got to learn from those lessons, right? So it was a good learning experience, and I was really proud of the 3 guys who actually ended up finishing off in a playoff. The guy who won, his name's Josh Burrs. Shout out to Josh. He plays in the NCAA at Samford, and this guy's like a shit brick house. Like, this guy is so big, tall, strong, hits it far, has good short game, that it makes sense that he won. He's a really good player. I think he came from behind on the final day to win, and I think he birdied the first playoff hole. So talking about Josh, I actually played with him in the first round, and he must have had 7 or 8 birdies in that first round. There was a couple bogeys that he didn't score as well as he should have, but it was evident that this guy was going to take a run. Yeah, to have 7 or 8 birdies in a round, it was fun to watch. Someone that refused to play in the club championship was my wife, Jess. She's been playing great golf all summer, but she's just had really bad experiences in previous years. Especially if you play no tournament golf and all of a sudden you're jumping into like a full rules, count every stroke, know the rules. It's pretty intimidating. So for her, I know that she's had some rough experiences just with knowing some rules, and you just feel anxious and uptight when you're not just swinging freely if you're out playing with your friends or your family. Now you're paired with people that you don't normally play with, and tournament golf is just such a different game than playing with your buddies. Even for these guys on tour, like for these guys to shoot 65, 66 with a crowd under normal circumstances, but like under the pressure that this is how you make your living, like it's so amazing how good these guys are. To give you an idea, the Canadian Tour comes through our course, and they play the ATB Financial event every year, and these guys just destroy the course. The course plays par 71, like 7,200 yards, 7,100 yards. These guys shoot 64, 65, 66, 63, 62. Like, it's just, and these guys are, trying to earn their living. A lot of these guys are sleeping out of their car, and they're shooting those good of scores. So it just puts it into perspective how good you have to play under tournament golf. Anyway, back to Jess. She's had some bad experiences with, I know, some rulings, and every now and then there may be a caddy player that you're playing with that will call you on things that aren't necessarily a ruling. And she just said, I don't want to deal with the stress of it. I don't want to have anxiety this weekend. I'm just not going to play. So she ended up playing with her family this year, her dad and a couple buddies, and she ended up shooting the best round of her life, which is so funny that it happened in club championship week. She ended up going let me back up. She had never broken 80. So she's come close. I think she's had rounds where she could have gone like par to shoot 79 or 78, but she's never broken 80. Anyway, this club champ weekend, she ended up going bogey 75, which is amazing golf, and she's definitely been trending in that direction. For a little girl, she hits it far. Her driver is wicked, and she's been putting really well too. So I wasn't there to witness it, but from what I hear, it was fairways and greens. It was par, birdie, par, birdie, bogey, par. Like, she just played unreal. So I'm so proud of her that she shot her career round. So now that scorecard's on the mantle. I'm really proud of her. So she wasn't super bummed out that she missed club championships. It kind of is what it is. But the kind of tough thing about the ladies club championship is that there's a much larger margin of handicaps in each division. So like the women's championship flight, for example, the low girl's a +4 and the cutoff was 7. So that's like an 11-stroke difference that you're trying to make up when you're playing a no-strokes event. So this year, Jess would have actually been the low cap in her flight. She would have been in the first flight. But, something about tournament golf just makes her uneasy and anxious, which is totally understandable. So I'm so proud of her for being able to shoot that 75, and I hope she can do it a whole bunch more times. I know that she took some money off of the guys, so that was also like a sweet victory. I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it to the guest of our show today. Our guest was the understudy of the PGA Tour coach, Sean Foley. Sean works with a number of top pros on the PGA Tour, and he also worked with Tiger when he started his comeback. This guest is now a full-time teaching pro and an online instructor. He's Canadian, but he teaches out at Trump National in Dubai. I'd like to welcome to the New Nine podcast, Alex Riggs. Alex, thanks so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So like I mentioned, you're Canadian and you're working in Dubai. How the heck does that happen?
Well, as you mentioned, I was working under Sean for a couple of years down in Orlando. And one day a Facebook message came through from, at that point, somebody at the Butch Harmon School in Dubai and sort of offered up that proposition. And it was at that point to a Saskatoon kid that's never really heard of Dubai. Dubai was the city of gold. It was some Disney place that doesn't even exist. So, we had a couple of Google searches and figured out that this place was real and looked into it, and it was a great fit for us.
So when did you start golfing and what got you into the game?
I started quite casually as like a tertiary sport. So I would have played a lot of baseball and hockey growing up as a kid. So baseball being the predominant summer sport. You kind of golf if you're going to the lake, or if you have nothing else to do, you might play around a golf. But I didn't really get into it seriously until I started working at a golf course in Saskatoon called the Saskatoon Golf and Country Club when I think I was 14. And I was picking golf balls out of the driving range, which was a water driving range. So picking up golf balls that floated into the side with a fishing net and some rubber boots on, and did that for a couple of years and sort of worked my way up through the industry and eventually really found a passion and more of an obsession with coaching.
What was the turning point? Did you try competing as a younger kid and maybe you didn't quite make it and went to coaching, or how did you kind of go from player to coach?
I knew very early on that coaching was a severe passion that I had. So I would have played like competitive junior golf, but by the time I was probably 17, 18, I would have known that coaching was the direction that I wanted to go. So then when I went into university, I studied exercise physiology. I wanted to know more about the body, how athletics functioned and everything like that. So I took more of an educational path to then further the coaching.
I want to go back a little bit to your life now in Dubai. It's obviously a way different climate and culture than Canada. What were some kind of culture shocks when you first moved over there?
I think it's just the variety of culture. Like you obviously have the Middle Eastern culture, but then you have like it's such a melting pot of cultures. People pass through Dubai from literally every country in the world, and it's such a hotbed for travel now that you can truly experience everything. You can experience every food imaginable. You can experience the sports that they play from those cultures, and it's just such a fascinating place because, especially with the role that I have as a coach, and I'm constantly meeting new people. I'm meeting new people from different backgrounds, different stories, different, like they come from different sporting backgrounds. They learn things differently. So it's a little bit different than what I would have grown up doing as a coach, kind of consistently speaking to Canadians using the language that we would use, maybe references to hockey and baseball. And now you're referring to cricket, or you're referring to soccer a little bit more. So it's changed things up a little bit, but I really do think so for the better.
That's awesome. How did the logistics work out? Do you get like a 1-year visa, or is it a renewed contract, or how were you able as a Canadian to work down there?
Initially, my wife and I were both employed by a company. So I was employed by the golf club, and she was employed because she's on the fitness end and all of the body, and she was employed by a sports chiropractor. And we basically went over there with contracts. And after a few years working at that club, we made the decisions to work independently. So we both now have our own businesses, which is fantastic. And we work under a local sponsor. So we have somebody that we work with, that we're very, very close with, that we're fortunate that he sponsors us.
That is so cool. Good for you guys for making that move. That's so wicked.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I saw that you have a partnership with PXG and Under Armour. How did those relationships kind of come to be?
They were opportunities that were presented to us a few years ago, kind of around the time that when we were making the decision to go independent. And at that point, PXG was sort of new to the game. and it was really good timing. They were looking for ambassadors in the Middle East, and we were happy to fit into those roles. And it's been an awesome company. PXG is such a great company to be tied to. I think we both like innovation. We both like, I guess, the term industry disruptors, people that kind of aren't afraid to step outside the box. And PXG has been phenomenal to work with. And as is Under Armour, it's a company really driven by athletics, and they make great golf stuff, great workout stuff. So very good to be tied to them.
That's cool. So do you get a new bag every year? Or are they sending you kind of trial stuff, or how does it work as far as the clubs that you're changing in your bag?
Yeah, always playing the newest gear, which I can't complain with that. Very lucky to be, playing state of the art equipment at all time, even if I'm maybe not playing as often as I'd like to. The gear is still there when I do happen to get out. But no, they always keep the bag nice and fresh, and they're so good in terms of sending us product and collaborating on ideas. We're always looking to do more for them, and they're looking to help show us off as well.
That's so cool. Working at Trump International, have you ever met Trump? Have you seen him on the course?
No. I think that Donald was out there before the opening, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was out there just before the opening. I think the golf course has been, I think they're in their third year right now. I believe every year one of his sons comes out. But Donald has yet to be there when I've been around there. But it's a great spot. I mean, say what you want about him as a president. And obviously people have their different opinions, but he designs very top end facilities, and the golf course truly is incredible. And it's very player friendly. It's really approachable for all handicaps, and it's truly maintained really exquisitely.
That's so cool. I've heard that a lot about Trump courses. I've personally never played them, but I know people that have, and they said, yeah, the course designs are just unreal.
Yeah, they are.
I know you predominantly from Instagram. You're someone that I've followed for the last couple of years, and you've definitely helped my golf game. In all the videos that you post, we'll obviously link your Instagram, but you post such amazing content that to just get a different perspective or a different angle, or to see someone professional move the club, it's been a big help personally. And I know that you help out tens of thousands of people, yearly to better their golf game. Tell me about the students that you work with in person and online. What are their skill levels? Just give me an idea of the people that you're helping coach.
To be honest, it's kind of at all levels. I think there was certainly a point, especially when I was doing a little bit less online work pre-COVID, because pre-COVID, I just had so much on the go in terms of live lessons and traveling to see players, and the idea of really taking on dozens and dozens of players to work online, I just wouldn't have had the time for it. And now with COVID, obviously creating new opportunities and sort of forcing you to make an audible, it's been really fun to work with players that I've never met before, which, typically most of the guys that I had worked with online were players that I have at least had one interaction with. Maybe they've come to see me in Dubai, and then we've sort of furthered that relationship. We continue to work online, but you already sort of understand that the players' patterns and sequences, and sort of diving more into online coaching since COVID started. It's been a really, really fun adventure, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm going to be continuing it even as I sort of get back to business here in a couple of weeks.
That's so cool. Yeah, good for you for making the most out of COVID. I know a lot of people obviously were in the opposite stance that, they couldn't work or what have you, but being able to coach online, I'm sure you've helped a lot of people, because for so long, the only thing we could do was golf. So I'm sure, you definitely helped me. So I appreciate the tips that you're pumping out. And I know that I'm only one of 10,000. Do you work with any notable players? Are there any guys on up and coming tours that we should know about that you're working with?
I work with quite a few players that would be on what we would consider to be like developmental tours. So they wouldn't necessarily yet be run of the mill names. But I work with a very, very young, talented player by the name of Dominic Cruz, who is a German kid. He was the best 15-year-old and 16-year-old in the world at one point. Very talented player. He's now 22 and playing kind of a combination of the Challenge Tour and European Tour. So he would be kind of the most notable name, but still quite a few that would be in the developmental ranks, and hopefully you'll hear a lot more from them soon.
Very cool. Is he someone that would travel to go see you in Dubai, or how did that relationship start?
Fortunately, he's based there. So he comes there, I would say, in late October. and sort of spends as much of his off season as possible in Dubai, and then sort of kicks off his European season typically around the January, February time. So we get a few months to work together. We're very good friends. We train together in the gym, and families are very close. So we have a really good time together. We've known each other even before the professional relationship as well.
That's really cool. Would he have a handicap, do you know, or if someone out there is thinking, maybe I could take a kick at becoming a professional golfer, what should the handicap be of someone that's, trying to make money playing golf?
So Dominic's a fun example. I'll probably get this wrong and he'll correct me, but I believe his handicap when he was 12 years old was a plus 5 or 6.
Wow.
Truly one of the best young juniors in the world. He had the lowest handicap in Germany at like some ridiculous age. I think he was like 13. So yeah, it typically takes a pretty impressive handicap to really make that leap to playing golf for a living. It's one thing to be able to go shoot a couple under par at your home club, but I would always say that's one level. Then there's the level of being able to do that where you play a couple of the clubs that maybe you've played a round or two at, but then being able to go travel internationally and play against people that you've never seen before and then still put up those kinds of performances. That's truly the next level of performance.
That's so cool. I'm really interested to know about your experience working with Sean Foley. Sean's one of the biggest names in golf coaching internationally, and especially on the PGA Tour. What was it like kind of being his understudy?
Sean's one of those guys, and I'm sure anybody that spent time with him can attest to this, he just expands your brain. He gets you to think differently. I think that if anything, like from a negative standpoint, he was always sort of criticized as being a complicated guy, too into technology. And that's truly such like misinformation and in and around him to really experience it, because Sean's style of communication is truly so special. Like he'll get to points differently than most other coaches will. And he'll do so in a way that he really gains that appreciation and respect out of his player. And, he was easily the biggest influence from the coaching perspective that I've had in what I've become as a coach. And, I'm eternally grateful to that.
That's so cool. Did you get to spend any time around some current PGA Tour players when you were working with Sean?
Yeah, without question. Most of his guys would come by to Orange County National, where we were based out of, and you get to watch them hit golf balls and sort of shadow in on lessons and just see what he was doing with them and how the communication, which that was the part that I was most intrigued with at that point, was, when you're at that point, I guess I would have been sort of early 20s, a tour player is sort of this like aura, right? It's this sort of like untouchable thing. And to see him speak to them like regular human beings that are just two guys having fun on the driving range was really important for me to experience. And no, it was truly, like an incredible part of my development.
That's so cool. Do you know, or can you think of who might've been like the best ball striker or the best player that you saw hit balls? You're just like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Like it makes perfect sense that this guy's a touring pro.
At that time, having not spent any time with Rory yet, at that time, I would have said his experience, like his time with Hunter Mahan, because I watched him and Hunter work together a lot. And Hunter was truly like a robot. And I mean that in a good way. Like just his ball striking was so impressive. And I'd watch him hit golf balls for hours and that was really special. But now, since having spent a little bit more time, on the range with Rory, that is truly like sort of next level.
Having never seen Rory live, whoops, just lost a golf ball. Having never seen Rory live, I understand he's not that big of a guy. TV doesn't really do it justice. How big of a guy do you think Rory is in person?
I think he's 5'9", 165 pounds. Yeah, he's not, you compare him to other athletes and he's by no means like a big figure. He's well built. Like Rory, I think if you see him in person, you'd say, yeah, he's built like a really like an ideal kind of golfer. He's got the right amount of muscle. He's very mobile. He's got great control of his body. And we get into the nitty gritty of it, and he's just got incredible movement patterns.
That's so cool. I'm interested when you get a lesson with someone who's never played the game before. What are some kind of fundamentals that you start with? Where do you start with someone that's never picked up a club before?
You start with a little bit of vocabulary initially because you don't want the whole lesson to be you confusing them. Okay. So I think you got to start by covering a couple of the basic vocabulary bits in terms of understanding where the club head is and what part of the head needs to strike the golf ball and where the grip is and how the grip needs to look. But typical first lesson objectives, I think the player needs to walk away with that from that first lesson with a sound idea of what they need to do to strike the golf ball in a way that'll get airborne every time. Okay. And it doesn't need to be a complication in terms of getting into too specifics with posture or even necessarily perfecting grip, but it's really just giving them the confidence and the know-how that they can feel that this game is approachable and that this game is something that is not going to be like solving these incredible math problems. It just needs to be something that's easy to digest.
That makes total sense. Golf is such a game of not only physical strength and ability, but mental strength and mental toughness. How do you teach mental toughness, and how do you practice on the mental side of your golf game?
That's a very good question. We like to take an approach for the most part of understanding expectations. I think a lot of players, their expectations of what they want out of themselves and think they should get out of themselves aren't quite realistic. And I think that's a big part of the mental game is understanding stats to a level that sort of suits your ability. Okay. And if you're a tour level player, yeah, it's fine to compare yourself to tour players. But if you're a weekend golfer that typically might shoot in the high 90s, understanding what is a good number of putts for you to have that day, like how many fairways should you hit? Like what really should be an acceptable miss for you with a 7-iron? When you start to understand these things, you start to realize that, okay, I'm expected to have a couple bad swings around. I'm probably going to only hit one or two perfect shots. Like I think it was Hogan used to say that. We're not going to go out there and just strike golf balls like we do on the driving range. There's just way too many variables on the golf course. So a lot of mental game is just really truly understanding that this game is difficult. Be easy on yourself. Like have good intense work ethic and practice things that are important to your game, but also understand that you are going to screw up. This is inevitable. And you know what? The easier we're able to sort of move on from that and recover from that, the better we're going to be.
That makes total sense. I think I saw something earlier on your Instagram talking about intent. Where do you intend to hit the ball? How do you intend to shape it? And that was such kind of like an aha moment that I was thinking like, oh yeah, I'm trying to just swing it my hardest, but I want to start it here and bring it over there. So to kind of come up with a game plan that makes total sense and have real expectations, that makes perfect sense to me. And I'm sure that'll resonate with a lot of other golfers.
For sure. Intent's everything. You got golfers, you take 20 amateurs and line them up on a driving range, they're all going to swing it different. Right. And, they come from different sporting backgrounds. They're built differently, different proportions, different strength variables, flexibility, but also their intents are different. And I think that's often something that's sort of left out of the equation, is that as like elite golfers sort of watching in on higher handicap golfers, we sort of assume that they think that they're moving the golf club the same way that we do, but they often don't. Mm-hmm. And sort of starting to understand things from their shoes, their perspective, put yourself into their brain, and it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Very cool. I want to talk a little bit more about Dubai, just because I'm so interested. I've never been to Dubai. I don't know anyone that's been to Dubai. Is Dubai a golf travel destination? Can you go there on a golf vacation?
Yeah, you definitely can. And it's becoming more and more that way. In fact, like even Saudi is becoming that way, which is an interesting one. But Dubai, from a golfing perspective, they're building more and more courses. I believe now they're probably in the range of like 13 to 14 courses in Dubai. And for the most part, most of those courses are what we would consider to be like high-end courses, like very, very well-conditioned tracks. And, people, it's not so much a North American travel destination. It's obviously 14 hours flight from Toronto. But if you're living in Europe, if you're living in Asia or Africa or, that part of the world, it's a much quicker flight. And to them, it's beautiful sunshine vacation, great food, you get your beaches, you get your shopping, and obviously you can play your golf. So it can be kind of the perfect destination for a lot of people. It's such a hotbed for tourism, really from November through kind of the start of April.
If you're going to go on a golf travel vacation, what are some green fees you're expected to play some pretty decent courses out there?
Canadian dollars, especially because when you'd go over there, you'd be going there in the sort of the peak season. I'd be thinking in the range of like 3 to 350 Canadian for most courses.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Do they have like municipal courses, or are they all pretty well higher end courses?
there are a couple. There are a couple for sure, and you can find deals. You can maybe find deals whether it be night golf and top golf's opening up soon enough. So there are like, night golf's a fairly popular thing in Dubai, especially in the warmer weather.
Hmm.
But no, it's you definitely pay a premium to play over there, but you'd notice that the service level would be very high. Like it would be very much similar to just like the private golf clubs of Canada, where you show up and somebody is there to greet you. There's often valet service. It's a different, but that's how Dubai works. Dubai
Right.
is very much like white glove, and that's kind of what you learn to expect over there. The service industry is very important in Dubai, and as a result of that, that's how golf is.
I believe that. Are there a lot of exotic cars you see in your parking lot at Trump International when you head to work? What are some cool cars you see in there?
I'm sure I've become a little bit more immune to it, where I've been there 7 years. So, the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis don't get you looking back as fast as they used to when you first move over there. But yeah, you get it all. I mean, it's, it's truly like a car. If you're a car lover, you're going to love it in Dubai because you'll see the best of everything.
I believe it, and that's why I asked. That I'm thinking Dubai. There's so many beautiful exotics that yeah, we have a one or two Lambos at our course, but I'm sure Dubai is a different story.
Yeah, it definitely can be.
What are some of the best courses you've ever played? If you could say play maybe three courses for the rest of your life, unbiasedly, what courses are you picking?
I'm definitely picking the one that I was at today. This has always been a favorite of mine. It's called Coppenwood. It's northeast of Toronto. Um, what else? What else? There's a golf course in Scotland called Loch Lomond. That's a truly special place that I absolutely love playing there. Um, and as a third one, I have very fond memories, and I'm going to go back to a Canadian option here of Predator Ridge. That was probably the first, I would call it like more high end golf course that I would have experienced as a junior golfer. And yeah, it had an impact on me. Like I still remember that golf course, and I think I would have played it when I was like 15 or 16 years old.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's hard to beat some of those interior BC courses just with the mountains and the elevation, and there's just some beautiful tracks out there.
Without question.
Um, Talking about Instagram as well, you definitely use it as a business tool. How has Instagram helped kind of grow your own personal brand and maybe get more clients as far as golf coaching goes?
It's a huge help, without question. You have, when you're really wanting to sort of build your coaching brand, you'll always get to know a couple players, and then you can slowly grow that business through referrals. Like those players, they play well, then their friends are wanting to know who they're working with, and you can gain players that way. But especially from this COVID business that we've been going through, Instagram has been a huge help. Being able to put more content online and really increase that reach to more people, and expand into some new countries, which has been really fun. So like that's kind of one of the fun things about Dubai, is that Dubai, given the number of travelers that we get coming through there, you meet people from all these different places, and I've been able to now travel to those countries, and through more and more online coaching, the number of countries just keeps growing.
You definitely have it figured out. Did anyone teach you kind of the algorithm or the back end of Instagram, or was it kind of a trial and error, or how did you get a successful following?
I have definitely found, I try to look at people that I would have said would have been good at it in the golf industry. Like there are some coaches that really do have a good niche in terms of putting out good content. And I really took it on as like, what do I like looking at? And what sort of videos am I intrigued and sort of drawn to? And then I think what's really helped the most is that just putting up lots of videos where I talk on just different topics that players are going through. I think that, I might put up a video tonight and it may not apply to one person, but it might apply perfectly to this next person. And that's kind of the bonus that you get from just being able to put it out there into Instagram, is that somebody's going to find that helpful. And I try for the most part, I'm typically just using videos that I'm using for my students. So these are all real world examples that people are going to be going through these problems every day.
Right. And that's why I love following you, that you're so personable. It's easy to listen to any of your videos, watch your lessons, that it's very relatable. And that's why I'm so glad that you came on the podcast. So yeah, what you're doing is fantastic. And I'm a big fan, and I'm hoping some people that follow New Nine will also now follow Rick's Golf.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
What's the best day you ever had on the golf course?
The best day. I've had some good ones. I've had some really good ones. I would say one of the best days I've ever had on the golf course was actually caddying for one of my players, Dominic Cruz, the player I was mentioning. I was caddying for him in a tournament in Germany last year, and he dunked his third shot for eagle on 18 in front of the gallery. He's a German kid, and this was a German event, and so he dunked his eagle from like whatever it was, close to 80 yards, 90 yards, wedge shot. And that would have been, in terms of like what I can think back, probably the most memorable from a positive standpoint time on the golf course. It was truly, truly special.
That's wicked. I'm interested in the caddy player or coach / caddy relationship when you're caddying a player. Yeah. Would your player ever get stuck and then you're talking about fundamentals, or is it more a mental thing? Like, he's obviously a good player, but how does that work when you're caddying a player?
No, it's a very good question. It's very important. Good players, and I say that meaning like good competitive tournament players, typically have an understanding how to switch gears from a learning state where they're working on a movement, working on a new pattern that maybe you're trying to implement into their swing. And they have this ability to sort of switch from that gear to, okay, I'm playing now. And when that happens, like, often the language changes, like how I would talk to them, how they would talk to me. We use different words. We talk less about internal things, and we talk a lot more about external things. And like what I'm referring to there is like internal being like feels like, okay, yeah, your right arm needs to do this, or your left leg needs to do that. These are all internal things. And these may be necessary to create pattern changes. And they're great for on the driving range if you're working on it, but they're not great if we're trying to perform. So if we're kind of perform, we've got to now work on more external cues. What's the ball flight like? How's the curve going to be? How's that golf ball going to spin coming off the face? Like those are things that are more externally driven and much easier to relate to from a playing perspective.
Thanks for the intel. Yeah, I've seen it before on the PGA Tour where maybe a caddy has an off week and the coach goes on the bag. And yeah, I didn't know what the type of conversation would be. So that's some really good intel. What's the worst day you ever had on the golf course?
That, you know what? Maybe I'm the wrong guy to ask that question to. We've all had bad days on the golf course where just things don't go our way. But, and the reason I say I'm the wrong guy to ask this to is just that they don't stick with me. I don't remember them. Like, inevitably they've happened. Of course they've happened, but nothing would stick with me long enough for me to actually be able to have a memory of it.
Wow. Well, that's another good lesson to forget. I dwell on my worst rounds, and sometimes those come out when you're having a good round. So, okay, to note it, to just forget about those, they didn't happen, move on to the next one. And that kind of leads me into my next question. We talked about the New Nine brand. New Nine is all about learning from bad breaks, bad mistakes. Can you think of a New Nine that you had, or maybe a player had of yours out on the golf course where things weren't going good and they turned it around and really came out ahead?
Oh, I know. I could think of countless examples of this. I just had a player, an Austrian player, very, very talented female golfer. She was playing in the final round of one of the competitive amateur events over in Austria. And she, I think she finished the front nine 6 over. And because she finished with like a triple and a double or something like that. And then ended up going 3 under on the back. And for her, 3 over is not a great round of golf. Like shooting 75 as a competitive golfer, she's not really happy with the 75. But more so from the fact that she went 6 over, 3 under, we were both celebrating it. And it was like one of those, that's how you compete. That's how we build off of this and being able to, because the thing is, like, many golfers, you shoot 6 over on the front nine as a good golfer, you're probably going to tank. You're probably going to just end up a few more over on the back. And then there's a day that you never want to talk about it again. But being able to come back from those experiences really shows that grit and that ability to never give up, which, certainly sounds like is the motto that you guys are after.
Totally. I have a specific question. I was talking earlier in the podcast before we brought you on as a guest that I just had the opposite experience. It was my club championships. In the championship flight, wasn't really in contention, and I thought I'm just going to start aiming at pins and go for some birdies. Threw down 5 birdies in the front 9 and a couple bogeys, so I was 3 under in the front. Then we had a weather delay. We had an hour weather delay. Going to the back 9, the wind picked up, the conditions changed. I went 33-44. The feeling that it was is that it felt like quicksand. There's an analogy in a football movie, The Replacements. Keanu Reeves is the quarterback. He talks about quicksand. And that's all that I could think about, is that one bad break turned into 2 bad breaks, turned into 3. And then I like blacked out. What could I have done to get myself out of that quicksand and then to just kind of turn things around?
Yeah. I used to have a hockey coach that used to always say that goals are like bananas. They come in bunches. I think it works the same way with birdies. I think it works the same way with bogeys. And it's just being able to understand when you're on those positive trains, you obviously just want to ride it. You want to keep that momentum going and keep the hot streak alive. But the tricky thing is, like, the worst thing that obviously happened to you was that weather delay, because you would have had a ton of momentum in your favor. And then all of a sudden there's this block. And then what that block does is that gets you thinking. It gets you going, okay, we're under par here. We're going to have a really good back 9. Where what we should be doing is probably spending that time away from the golf course when you're on weather delay, listening to music, reading a magazine, doing something that has nothing to do with your golf game at all.
Right.
The worst thing that you can do is just be thinking about it, right? That just creates more tension, more expectation, and then we get in our own way. But that stuff is so common. Just being able to sort of understand that when things are going well, they're typically going well because we're not overthinking and overanalyzing. We're just sort of letting our body work in that, what people call like a flow state.
Right.
And that's really just letting things happen. We've all trained, we've all put time in. Your skill set is your skill set. I don't have Tiger Woods' skill set, and you don't have Tiger Woods' skill set, but we have our own. And that own is probably good enough to go shoot pretty good numbers in the golf course, as long as we don't get in our own way.
That makes total sense. And I did exactly what you told me not to, is that you're thinking about it, you're talking with your friends, you're like, okay, let's make some snips on the back. And then, you have all this expectation. Then you feel like you're not only letting yourself down, but you're letting the other people down who knew that you had a good round going, right? So golf is such a stupid game, but we love it. We keep coming back.
Exactly.
Well, one last question for you. Have you had a new 9 in life? Did you work another job and you figured that golf was the career path that you wanted, or relationships, anything just life specific that you were down in the dumps and you're able to persevere and come out ahead?
I've had many jobs, many jobs. I've worked in the golf industry, like I said, since I was 14, but I've always had sort of supplementary jobs throughout the winters. But in order to answer your question, I think the biggest sort of transformation for me has been going independent as a coach. I was very fortunate as a coach to work underneath a lot of very, very impressive coaches and people in the golf industry, even if they're not on the coaching standpoint, just good golf professionals. And, being able to sort of learn from each and every one of them. And then at some point, 3-4 years ago, making that commitment to say, okay, we're going to do things the way that we've been trained to, and have my own sort of personal touch to it. And that was really important, and really has opened up a lot of opportunities.
That's so cool. Good for you, man. You're definitely in a good space. And I can tell just talking to you that you're so passionate about what you do. And it's so cool, of you helping to grow the game through professionals all the way down to amateurs. So I appreciate what you're doing in the community to help continue to grow it. And I really appreciate you coming on the New 9 podcast. So that wraps us up. I really appreciate having you on, Alex. How can I plug any of your feeds? How can people see you and follow you?
They can follow me anywhere. Typically, I put everything through Instagram, and it's at Riggs Golf.
And that's RIGGS Golf. Alex,
Correct.
Again, thanks so much for coming on the New 9 podcast, man. Safe travels back to Dubai. Hopefully this whole COVID thing is just a thing of the past, and that we can kind of get back to normal. So again, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So something that I always ask my guests, obviously, is, their best day and their worst day on the golf course. I wanted to give you guys a little background about my worst day on the golf course. I have 2 instances that I can think of. Both sucked, but they were obviously learning lessons. So the first one happened about 5 years ago. I was in our men's match play semifinals. And the gentleman I was playing with is a wicked golfer, and we ended up getting to the third hole. I think we're even at this point. He might have birdied the first hole, I birdied the second. We're all even through two. We're going to the third. Third's a par 4, and I was going to hit an iron. It was my 7 iron off the tee. And I remember I took my club right back to my top swing, and as I had swung down, my club like shattered or my club fell apart. It was a feeling I had never had before. So I'm kind of like just in shock. I'm like, what the heck happened? I didn't even make contact with the ball and my club is like broken. What the hell happened? And my playing partner, he says, Brandon, you're bleeding. Like, what do you mean I'm bleeding? I looked down at my hand. It was my right hand. And there's a huge gash on my hand. So what ended up happening is on the top of the grip, maybe 3 or 4 inches down from the grip, I had ripped or broken the steel shaft from the grip. So as I had come down to start my swing, the broken shaft actually cut my finger. So looking down at my finger, it was kind of from my if I make a fist, my knuckle, if you were to punch something, that knuckle, all the way to my finger knuckle was gashed wide open. Like I could see the bone. So obviously I had to withdraw that match, and then we called the pro shop just to send a cart out to pick me up. Obviously I had to go get stitches. They ended up calling an ambulance, which is a little embarrassing because obviously I could like walk, like I'm fine, I don't need an ambulance. But anyway, they end up calling an ambulance. They look at it, they're like, yeah, obviously you need some stitches. Or like, if you want to save a couple $100, get someone to drive you to a clinic and they'll stitch you up. So I ended up getting 6 or 7 stitches on my my right index finger, and I think the worst part was just getting the freezing into the finger. But it was maybe a 2 or 3 week healing period. I had kind of like a small mini bandage on my finger, and I remember golfing. Like I probably made the healing process last longer because I wanted to golf so bad that I was golfing with my stitched finger and a bandage. So that was one thing that I can remember being a not so great day, that here you're trying to go play a match play semifinal, and I ended up obviously cutting my finger. So that sucked. The good thing that came of it is at the time the clubs were like 3 years old, and I wrote to them. I wrote to the club manufacturer. I can't tell you who they were, but they were a big club manufacturer, and I told them what happened. And I sent them a picture of my finger because obviously it was pretty gruesome. And I said, look, like I'm scared to play these clubs with the fear of something else happens. So I sent the club in, they examined it. They said, obviously, it's broken. We can't deem how it broke or if it was broken previously. They said, what we're going to do is we're going to replace the club, which with them, it was, in good faith. But at the time, I was pretty upset that I was scared of it happening with my other clubs. So I said, look, I appreciate you wanting to fix my one club, but I'm scared to use the rest of my set in just fear of this happening again. So what they did is they said, tell you what, sign this non-disclosure and we'll send you a new set of clubs. So again, I can't tell you who the company was, but I said, which PGA Tour player is playing this one brand type of club, and so they ended up sending me a full new set of irons. So I was really appreciative of what they had did. The irons were great. I ended up getting my first and only ever hole-in-one with that set of irons, and so kind of a crummy situation, but the manufacturer did a really awesome job as far as replacing that set, because it was such a freak accident. Like, it was so weird. It wasn't on impact, it was at the top of my backswing. Just the torque of pulling the club down is what broke that shaft. My other terrible golf experience, this happened just last year. We were in a winter trip to Phoenix, and I was playing an early round golf with my brother and my wife Jess. And at about the second or third hole, I could just feel this weird lower pain in my back. And at first I thought it might have been gas, but it was just a weird feeling that I had just never felt before. So I played through the first couple holes, and I remember I was playing well. I think I was like 2 or 3 under through 4. And this pain just kept progressively getting worse and worse and worse. I said, you know what, maybe I'll just go to the washroom and see if this will pass. And anyway, as I get there, it's continually getting worse and worse and worse. Now I'm in a lot of pain, and just knowing your body when something's not right, this was like instantly like something is not good here. So within the next half hour, my pain went from about a 3 to a 4 to like a 9. So I get Jess, my brother, I said, we got to go. Like, something is totally wrong. Like, we need to go see a doctor, go to a hospital. Something is wrong. By the time I get to the pro shop, I can't even sit. I'm like fully hunched over, and my back is freaking killing me. So I Google, WebMD, instant lower back pain, and the first thing that came up was kidney stone. So I had never even really heard of a kidney stone prior, but all of the symptoms that I was experiencing seemed to be a kidney stone. So I told the kid in the back shop to call me in an ambulance. Now, I'm a Canadian traveling to the States. Thank God I had insurance coverage on my credit card. So they end up calling, it works a little different in the States. The first responders were firemen. So at this point, I'm like dry heaving, throwing up in the parking lot of this golf course, and just in like so much pain. Like I've never been in this much constant pain before. So the fire department come, they check my vitals. They're like, look, your vitals are okay, but it sounds like you're having a kidney stone. Have you had a kidney stone before? No, I haven't. They said, well, we can get you an ambulance, but again, if you want to save some money, get your wife to drive you. There's a clinic or a doctor's office just down the road. So I couldn't even sit in the car. I had to lie sideways just because any pressure that I put on my lower back just totally killed the pain. So had I not been with like my wife or my brother, I don't know how I would have made it through this, because I couldn't even talk. Like I was just in so much wincing pain constantly that I really couldn't talk. So I gave all my cards to Jess, and she goes to check in with the lady at this, let's call it an emergency clinic. And I'm in the waiting room, and again, I couldn't sit. I'm on like my knees and elbows, like basically like in the doggy position, because that was the only position I could be that was just not this most excruciating pain. Anyway, I end up getting in to see the doctor. They do a CAT scan. They said, yeah, you got a kidney stone and it's just about to your bladder. So you kind of just got to deal with this. There's really nothing that they can do for a kidney stone. So they pumped me full of bag of fluids, gave me some morphine. The morphine brought my pain from probably a 10 to an 8, that it still was just not great. And they're like, look, you just have to pass it. So I've never felt so hopeless just being in that much pain and be like, I have no idea when this is gonna stop, but it freaking sucks so bad. Long story short, I ended up passing it that night, passed it naturally. It was just like the worst experience. So since I haven't had one, thank God, I've done everything I can, meeting with a nutritionist as well as a naturopath, just to go over the different types of foods that you put in your body. What I learned about these kidney stones is that the most common is called a calcium oxalate type stone, and that's when you're either deficient in calcium or oxalate. So the two kind of create a science experiment that they absorb each other and then they drain through your bladder. If you're deficient in one or the other, they actually cling to your kidney. So over a year or however long, they don't know, this stone had continually built up. Whether I was dehydrated, whatever happened, it broke off and then goes through your kidney into your urinary tract. So the pain isn't when it's in your bladder or when you pass it. The pain is as it goes from your kidney to your bladder. There's let's call it a 1/4 inch rock moving through an 1/8 of an inch tube. So it's the scraping and scratching of that stone making its way to the bladder to eventually you passing it. So anyone that's ever experienced this, I have so much sympathy for you that it freaking sucks. The biggest key to not getting one is just to stay hydrated. So now I drink more water than I've ever drank before in my life to continually flush my system. If you're not a big drinker of water, try to drink as much water as you can, because anything to avoid this is so worth it. Like it sucked so bad. The only way I could explain it to someone is if I was to guess what it felt like to be shot like by a gun like through my lower back, that's what I would guess that it felt like. Like it just sucked so bad, and it was so uncomfortable. It was really life-changing. And it actually had a lot of psychological damage after the fact, just from dealing with that experience. I would wake up every day like, am I going to have another kidney stone? Am I going to have another kidney stone? And it's just, you start living in fear. And obviously since that has passed, it's been over a year and a half. But it sucked. So as far as worst days on the golf course, that was it by far. So now 2 times an ambulance has been called to the golf course for me. One, I think I needed it. The other, I obviously didn't. But those were definitely my worst days on the golf course. My best days on the golf course, I've been in what they call the zone. So twice I can think of all time I've ever been in the zone. Sometimes pro athletes talk about being in the zone, whether it's Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant putting up like 81 points. It's just whatever you do, it's effortless and it goes exactly the way you want it to. So both at the time were my career low rounds. The first time was 3 or 4 years ago. I shot a 65 in my men's night or no, it was men's league. It was actually in a tournament, like a doubles match play. I had shot a 65, and it was just one of those days where everything was going at the pin. It was the middle of the fairway, pin, one putt. If I missed my putt, it was a two putt. Like, I had never been that low. I think at the time I was maybe like a 2 cap, and I had like par rounds, maybe 1 under, 2 under, but nothing to that extent. So at the time, 72 or 700 par, 65, by far my best round. And to look at results like that, it's so fun that you put some practice and some effort into something, and then it just, the light clicks and it turns on. I didn't come anywhere close to that, not even until a couple years after. Last year I shot my now career low. I shot a 69 on our men's night final. So it was tournament play. I had to play by the rules, had to play by the book. And the odd thing about this 63 is that I was actually playing with a 5-some. So this was our men's league final. We were in a commercial league. You're in a team of like 10, 12 guys, and this is the final that you and all of your team go out, and you just, I don't know if it was a Stableford or what the format was, but you just go out with guys on your team. So some teams had a 3-some, other had a 5, a 6, but that's the one interesting thing about this round. And then it was a shotgun, so we started on like the 13th hole, and I think I had like 6 or 7 pars. Like, I was for my stars, there's a par. And then we get to a drivable 17th. The drivable 17th hole, I think it maybe like 360, 370 downwind, but I've hit it a couple times. So I end up driving the green, and I'm looking at like a 40-foot putt, kind of like uphill slider, and I end up sinking the putt. So here I am 2 under with a bunch to play, that I'm like, wow, okay, maybe I can do something here. Anyway, that round I had 7 birdies and that eagle. So I obviously went on a heater after I had eagled that par 4. Anyway, so that was by far the best round that I had ever had. A 63 is something that I can, kind of hang my coat on, that it was unreal. And like I said, just being in the zone, you kind of black out, that you don't think about any swing thoughts. You have an objective. I'm going to hit the middle of the fairway. Boom. I'm going to hit it to 10 feet. He hit it 10 feet. Like, to just have that confidence to just go at pins. This is what pros must operate at full time, to shoot these scores on a regular basis. Like, I've only done it once in my life, and I haven't come anywhere close since. That it's really just so impressive as to what these guys do. Obviously, I've had a million of phenomenal rounds with wicked friends and family on beautiful courses, but I'll never forget those 2 rounds to shoot a 63 and a 65. So that's my best and worst days on the golf course. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of history as far as my experiences on the golf course. I had some questions about the pictures that I have in my podcast studio behind me. I'm going to kind of just go through them so that in my future videos, why are these pictures behind me. So I'll go from my left over my shoulder. There's a picture of the, in my opinion, the godfathers of golf, at least for me, knowing the golf, obviously being in my 20s, Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. 2 guys that really helped grow the game. I think Arnold Palmer was the first professional athlete to ever have an endorsement deal. I think Wilson Golf was the first ever sports endorsement deal, that he kind of opened the doors for athletes to start making money outside of golf. So now you look at every golfer that has a watch that they wear, or a patch on their shoulder, or something on the top of their hat, that now these guys are making tons of money just from endorsements. Jack Nicklaus obviously won so many majors, such good golfers. So anyway, this picture, I actually bought it for my dad one year, and my dad, like I mentioned in previous videos, has so much sports memorabilia stuff that I kind of went to his house to pick over some golf specific stuff just to hang in my podcast studio. So there's actually a bunch of stamps from some cool courses. There's like Pebble Beach, or what else is on there, Cypress, Kiowa. Anyway, there's a bunch of cool stamps. It's not autographed or anything. I just think it's a really cool picture of Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. So I think those guys are wicked. On kind of a side note, in one of my first videos, I talked about my dad getting autographed pictures. So I named off a bunch of golfers, and then I threw in Jack Nicholson in there, and the actor. And my dad does have an autographed picture of Jack Nicholson, but I don't know why I threw it into a whole bunch of golfers. I was talking about Arnold Palmer and Tiger Woods, Mike Weir, whatever. But yeah, I did a little at the time confuse the two, but to clarify, my dad does have a Jack Nicholson and Jack Nicklaus autograph, headshot 8x10. So anyways, someone did notice that in the comments, so I just wanted to clarify. Behind me, I found these autographed pictures of current PGA Tour players on a Facebook buy-sell page group. So I told you before about the head covers that I sold just a niche in head covers, buy, sell, Scotty Cameron. There's also a big niche in golf memorabilia. So this is a page that I found that these guys are, collectors of sports. And this was specifically golf autograph pictures. So I got a couple pictures framed of just golfers that I like and I enjoy looking at. So I never met these guys, but I definitely look up to them, and they're golfers that I really enjoy watching. One is Xander Schofley. So Xander's another guy that I think can be in contention this week that I didn't talk about. I have bet on him, but he's another guy that could definitely be winning a major in the next couple years. Justin Rose is another guy that I really look up to. He's just so solid, been so solid for so many years. This year's been a little different for Justin Rose. I don't know what's going on with him. He had that big Hama deal, that new club company, and I think he's since left them. So a few endorsement changes. I know he's had a couple putter changes, but he's a guy that's really been steady for so many years. It's just a matter of time before he kind of comes back on top. And then another one is Hideki Matsuyama. Hideki's one of my favorite golfers in some of the things that he does. I call it a Hideki when you finish and then you start complaining. So he's so notorious for, hitting a good shot. The announcers can't really see where the ball is, and he throws his club or he drops his club or he's just so disappointed, and then it lands to 10 feet. So that just cracks me up every time I watch Hideki hit a good shot and he's so upset. So if friends do that, I definitely call them a Hideki, or call it a Hideki. When you hit a good shot, you look unimpressed. We also call that a jug violation. I don't know how many, there's got to be a ton of other people that play call a jug violation. Jug violation could be not hitting it past the ladies' tee, you owe a jug of beer. You putt off the green, you owe a jug of beer. In this case, you hit a shot that you don't think is good, it ends up being really good, you owe a jug of beer. So call it a jug, call it a Hideki. Anyway, he's someone that I really enjoy watching. The last picture to my right, it'd be your left, is a big frame picture of something that's actually really special to me. It was the first time I had ever seen PGA Tour player golf. So this is something my dad had made up. My dad is a hobbyist professional photographer as well. So he'd shot so many sporting events, as well as, he's very accomplished in wildlife photography. He's actually on the cover of Canadian Geographic of their calendar last year. But this is a picture that he took himself and that he had made. It's from 2006 at the TELUS Banff Skins game. So at the Skins game, there was Jack Nicklaus, Sergio Garcia, John Daly, Greg Norman, Stephen Ames, and I think Mike Weir was there, a couple other guys. Anyway, it was in 2006. So how old am I in 2006? 14 years old. I'm at seeing my first time ever PGA Tour players. So we only live an hour and a half away from Banff, and to be at the Banff Springs Golf Course, it's an amazing world-class golf course, and I had obviously never played as a 14-year-old. But I got to walk around and watch, these guys. It was Sergio was just a big up-and-comer. John Daly obviously was huge. Greg Norman, already a legend. Jack Nicklaus, already a legend. And then Stephen Ames obviously was a touring pro at the time. He had that infamous loss to Tiger in the match play. I think he was talking a little trash, and then Tiger just mopped the floor with him. I can't even remember what the score was, but I know it was just horrendous. Anyway, this picture is autographed by Stephen Ames. And when I had played organized hockey, a guy that we played with was one of the neighbors who lived in a cul-de-sac with Stephen Ames, so they knew him personally. My dad had this picture blown up, and he actually sent it to this family to see if Stephen would autograph it for us, and he kindly did. So the autograph is from Stephen Ames, and then it's a wicked photo that I will probably have the rest of my life, that I just remember being at that tournament. A funny story from that tournament is we were spectating on a par 5. I think it's the second or third hole, and we're behind the green. These guys are hitting their second shot into the par 5, and I'm with a couple buddies, and we see a ball kind of come up in the air, and we think it's coming for us. And sure enough, the ball is landing, and it lands 6 inches to my right and hits my buddy. It hits my buddy. First ever PGA Tour event, and first time we see someone get hit, and it happens to be my buddy. So it was Stephen Ames. I think he had airmailed a long iron or a hybrid. He came over and then signed his glove and gave it to my buddy and made a quick joke. But I remember I was like, oh, man, I should have just dove in the way of that ball so I could have gotten hit and I could have got that glove. Anyway, so that's kind of the stuff behind me. I'm always growing my collection. I'll try to add more stuff over time, but that's just kind of a history of the stuff behind me. It's obviously a golf-themed podcast. Oh, I'll tell you about my trophy too. This little trophy up front, if you can see it, is my mom is just the sweetest. My mom heard about my hole-in-one, my first ever hole-in-one, my only hole-in-one. I was on a guy's golf trip in the Phoenix area, and we were playing the Boulders course. I think it's in Carefree, Arizona. Anyways, like half hour outside of Phoenix, and we're playing a skins game. I'm playing just god awful, and then we get up to the signature hole. If you've seen this course, there's a big, massive boulder. I don't know what it weighs. Maybe it's gotta be like 10,000 pounds. This massive rock. It's the Boulders course, and we're at the boulder. Anyway, hit a beautiful. It was an 8-iron. I think it was like maybe 175, 180 yards. Kind of lands 6 feet right at the pin and then just sucks right in. And it was one of those like, oh my gosh moments. Like if you ever had a hole in one, it's almost too good to be true. But to see it was unbelievable. So in the skins game, that was the only hole that I won. So I didn't end up owing money, but I didn't win as much money as I obviously should have with a hole in one. So my mom is so sweet. She saw this little golfer trophy, I think at a Winners, and she ended up picking it up and then got it engraved. And it's, you know, a Brandon Hewitt hole in one, the date and the course. So she's just so sweet that she would go out of her way to make me something special. It's kind of a weird shape. Like I think whoever made the trophy clearly doesn't golf, because the position would be looking down the line and then you're following through like behind you. Maybe, you know, when Phil Mickelson hit that flop shot like behind him and it goes backwards, maybe that's what he did. So anyway, it's so nice of my mom to have made that for me. She's just so cute. And then this little golf ball just at the base of that is autographed by Blair O'Neill from the Golf Channel, or Big Break. She's obviously a huge personality on Instagram and social media. Jess and I went to it was called the Diamond Resorts Invitational. This is 2 years ago. We did a winter trip to Florida, and the Diamond Resort Invitational was on. We got a 2-day pass, and we just walked around. It was pretty cool to get access. There was a mix of celebrities, LPGA Tour players, and then there was some Champions Tour players too. So we're big Blair fans. We followed Blair for a couple holes, and she made a rough bogey in a par 5, and we're in the gallery. The gallery's not very big. There's maybe like 30 people around, and we're kind of walking with her to the next tee on the side of the ropes. And I said to Blair, I said, hey Blair, I said, do you want me to get rid of that ball for you? Like, it's not doing too well. I think you need to change the ball. So she kind of smiled and walked to the tee. She hits her tee ball on the next hole, and we continue to walk with her, and she says, hey, she says, I think this ball might do you guys better than it did me. So she had signed it and then threw it to Jess and I. So it was so nice of Blair to acknowledge us and then to send or throw us a signed ball. So obviously I have a ton of golf memorabilia stuff. This is just stuff that I wanted to decorate inside of the podcast studio. Like I said, it's going to continually grow. And anyway, it's just kind of a bit of a history and my personality as to, you know, why we're big into golf, and I just wanted to share with all of you. So anyway, that kind of wraps up our episode 6 of the New Nine Golf Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like, comment, do what you can to support the golf community, and I hope all of you guys enjoy the game as much as I do. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.